All right, folks, welcome to another Los Angeles Salesforce Developer Group meeting. I am your host, Nathan Pepper, and we will eventually be getting back in person, but I think it's nice to have these virtual events because people can join from anywhere, and we'll also have this recorded so that you can catch it later, which some of you may be doing right now as you watch this. Um, I have got very educated and learned CI/CD expert here, Sebastian Kessel from Code Science, and I'm going to let him kick it off. And if you stay afterwards, I'll have a couple announcements, and we'll take any Q&A. But without any further ado, Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start sharing my screen first. Got a little thing. Yeah, I think you can see it. So good afternoon to you, Nathan. Good morning to our attendees. Some of them are not in our time zone. Uh, want to welcome you all to this presentation. I hope you guys enjoy it. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, but I'm not going to be paying a lot of attention to screens live. That way I can kind of keep my eye on the presentation. But rest assured, I'm sure I'm going to get to all of your questions as we go through. So first, let me introduce myself. Again, my name is Sebastian Kessel. I am the manager of the TA group at Code Science. My hometown, I was born in Argentina. So if you guys are watching this at some point, just know that not even a month ago, we won the World Cup, and I'm still very, very happy about it. But I currently live in Los Angeles. I live in Rancho Palos Verdes, which is part of Los Angeles to the south of downtown. And you can find my email on that slide out there. This slideshow will be, I'll give Nathan the slideshow so he can make it available to everybody watching this, because there will be some links and some resources for you to look at later. So I promise I won't bore you too much with this. I want to talk about Code Science a little bit. Code Science is a software engineering company in America. We don't have headquarters per se. We're distributed all over this country and even some people outside of the country. We're about 150 people, including 2 CTAs and a whole bunch of things we've done. Code Science has very deep expertise on what is the PDO market, meaning that we build, among other things, products for people. And just to brag a little bit, 70% of the revenue that goes through the App Exchange today is invested in projects that Code Science helped develop. So we have a lot of experience on that, but that's not the only thing we do. We also do more traditional software engineering projects. So if you're listening to this and you're looking for expertise, we are your team. Again, these are some of the people. We have a very diverse group of folks and what I think are very interesting and very true values that we really try to live by. And the obligatory slide with all of our clients, I'm sure you're gonna recognize a lot of those names out there. We've worked with companies of all sizes, big and small, but we can grab enterprise project for huge customers, but you can also deal with small companies who really need solutions. So with that, what are we going to talk about today? So today we're going to start our conversation talking about what is DevOps, or at least how we typically look at DevOps. We're not going to cover the whole topic because there's a lot of stuff to do. Then I'm going to go a little bit about what DevOps looks at Code Science. We're going to talk about differences when you develop using sandboxes versus when you use scratchworks. Then I'm going to give you a mini demo, and we're finished with Q&A. We've been calling it a mini demo because unfortunately I am not able to share the code I'm going to use. But what I do want to do is illustrate a little bit of how CI/CD works and the types of things you could do. My email is out there, so if someone has a specific questions, I'll be happy to help you get unstuck. So it's not that I'm going to disappear on you, but I can't share the actual code I'm going to show you today. So with that, let's launch. So what is DevOps? Let's start with that. So even, we have these purpose, why, and how. So DevOps is a suite of technologies that will allow us to build solutions faster with less bugs and increase efficiency. I'm kind of going to read this a little bit and see if I can elaborate as I read. So, but why do we do DevOps? So when we implement developer operations, which is what DevOps stands for in a company, what we usually talk about is implementing continuous integration, continuous delivery, which is CI/CD. There are other aspects of DevOps like automated testing, like deployments. We're not going to cover that here. So for the most part, when I talk about DevOps, I'm going to be talking about continuous integration, continuous delivery, specifically CI. CD is a consequence of CI in my mind. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the main reason why you want to integrate CI/CD and DevOps in your organization is because I'm sure we're all familiar with what happens if you have more than one person working in a given environment. It's very easy, especially as the project grows, that you have someone creating code in a class, in an Apex class, for example, and overwrites what somebody else has built. That is, 80% of the time when you have more than one team and you have a big code base, you're stepping on each other's toes, and so you're going back to your original code. The other thing that CI allows you to do, and this is another great thing, is it frees you from the tyranny of change sets. And that is no small thing. So when you create objects or page layouts or flows or Apex or whatever, in a traditional environment, you have to open a change set, package it all up manually, move it to the next environment, deploy it, hope that it works. If it doesn't, you go back, you clone the change set, you make your changes, you go on. It can be incredibly tedious. CI/CD and DevOps get rid of all of that. How? How does it get rid of all of that? Well, it's very simple. The code lives in VCS. VCS is really what GitHub stands for, right? So GitHub, Subversion, there's GitLab, there's all kinds of tools that you can use. Oh, sorry, I moved my mouse. Bitbucket. So the code lives there. The source of truth switches from the sandbox or the environment you're working on to a source control environment. The other thing we do is we dedicate either one sandbox or scratch org for each developer. So we do not allow more than one person in one environment. That is what we're trying to avoid, actually. We have environments that are dedicated for QA, meaning we don't do developing those things. And very important, the deployments from environment to environment have been automated, or they're triggered by an action as opposed to being manual, where you have to kind of collect what you did and then move it from place to place. So let's talk about what's next. On a high level, the way DevOps work is the following. As a developer, you do your work on your environment. Let's call it a scratch org or a sandbox or a PDE, whatever it is. You commit your work to a GitHub branch, to your repo. When you do that, your org automatically builds, and you want that for sanity check. And if something fails, it's identified early, and then it goes all over again. So what this process allows you to do is allows you to constantly be verifying that the code you're writing works very well with the code that somebody else is writing as well. And so if you're writing a functionality that depends on creates a validation rule, and somebody else is writing test code, well, if the test code I'm writing trips that validation rule and my test no longer works, I find that out really quickly. By the way, that's one of the most common scenarios here. It happens all the time. Someone creates a validation rule in the account object, for example, and you want to write some test code, and all of a sudden that validation rule doesn't match anymore. And instead of having to find out that this doesn't work all the way at the end, you find it at the beginning. So what we want here is to fail early, because the earliest we fail, the earlier we fix the problems, and that's when problems are cheaper to fix. Fixing something in production is very expensive. Fixing something very early on can take 5 minutes. So we want to do that whenever possible. So let's move on to a little bit about how we do things at CodeScience. So that's a nice little chart, but no one can understand that. So here's the original Lucy chart. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit so I can show you. There we go. So this is a sample of how this could work. There are many ways of branching. This is one of them. You guys may choose something else that could be just as valid. So this strategy is just an illustration of something that could be done. It assumes that we have developers working on one feature at a time in their own environments, but you could also extend these to feature branches. So you could have someone building, I don't know, a CPQ product and another series of branches on people building some sort of account management tool, and somebody else building a community. You can have feature branches for each one of those features that they all come together later. This branching strategy can be really, really complex. I'm not going to complicate it here. I'm going to talk to the simple scenario we're going to deal with today. So in this scenario, what we start is with the development environments, what we as devs typically do. So we have a Scratch org. This hinges on Scratch orgs, but you can substitute in your mind the word Scratch org with Sandbox. The difference at this level is irrelevant. There are differences, clear, but not when it comes to strategy. So you work on a Sandbox or on a Scratch org, and when you're done doing that, you retrieve your changes into your local hard drive, and you can do that by a number of ways. I will illustrate one of those ways in a few minutes. And you commit them to your repo. When you commit them to your repo, but essentially what you're doing is you're saving your code in the cloud. After you're done, let's say you finish the task, you finish the story, you finish whatever it is that you want to finish, and you say, I am now ready, Brian is now ready to push his code to an integration sandbox. The integration sandbox, which is the second level you see right here, is where all of the code from all of different developers gets together. So Mary will do the same, I will do the same. So the way it works is when Brian is ready and pushes, I check Brian's code against the integration branch, and if everything works okay, I create what's called a pull request. Pull request, in case you're not familiar with GitHub or any of the analogs, is essentially a request for someone to say, I have this code, I need you to put it in that branch. In this case, the branch is integration. When that PR is reviewed and approved, and again, you can have an automated approval, or you can have a very extensive code review process that depends on how complex you want to be. That code makes it through this thing into integration, and it builds, and it runs tests, and it essentially deploys as if it were deploying to production. So what happens is Brian puts now his code in integration. Now the person merging pull request says, I'm going to merge Mary's. Now, if Mary's code works with Brian's code, great. The thing's going to build, and it's going to work just fine. But what if Mary has that example we talked earlier? What if Mary created a validation rule that breaks the test code that Brian wrote? It's going to fail an integration, and Mary's going to have the opportunity to grab the code that we have in integration, bring it into her environment, and fix the problem herself before attempting to PR again. This is actually very common. It sounds complicated, it sounds very cumbersome, but in reality, it's all a few clicks away on github.com if you're merging PRs, or on a GitHub client or command line if that's what you're choosing to do. And then we continue doing the same thing. From integration, we go down to a QA environment. This is where our QA people do their testing. Once our QA people are happy with their stuff, we move things to UAT, so maybe our clients can do it. And clients can mean actual clients if you're a consulting company, but it can also mean end users, the people who are coming out with this is what I need you to build me. Once all of that's done, and you've got approval from all of your stakeholders, you push to production. In our case, we use the master branch of GitHub as production. You can name it something else. It's okay. These branches don't have to be the same. Now, you will notice that each one of these branches, each one of these yellow things, I've been calling them branches. It's a remote branch in github.com, has a sandbox next to it. Because every time you push code in here, this red line is executed, meaning there's a process that grabs all the code that you merged and puts it in that org and deploys it to that org. And this is a Salesforce org. You can log into it, you can configure it, you can do whatever you want. Clearly, it's in your best interest to keep these things as identical to production as you can. But that also means that, after pushing something to prod, if these are sandboxes, you can refresh them all. I recommend you don't do it every time, but if you refresh the sandboxes, then you're going to get everything that's in production, including some data if you have a false copy sandbox, for example. So that's going to help you be better at testing. All of these things are, it's complications on CI/CD, but these are things that you can do if you go this route. So again, you start development, life of code starts being developed here. And I say code, but I really mean this could be flows, or it could be process builders, further deprecated, or validation rules, or all these kinds of things. It doesn't need to be just code. It could apply to pretty much, not all metadata, but pretty much any metadata you have. There's some notable exceptions. Communities, for example, cannot be moved this way. But for the most part, most of the places where you spend your time, components, flows, objects, page layouts, applications, all of these things can move, even static resources. So as you can see, this is very easy to do. There are no manual steps here. There's no compile the change sets and deploy it. It's all rebase, get the information from the branch, work, finish, push it from the branch, hit the reset button, start all over again with your next story. It's very easy to do. There's a lot of people who, instead of dealing with branches, they deal with instead of dealing one branch per person, they deal with one branch per story. So if you work on something like Jira, for example, you spin off a branch for ticket 1 to 3, you work on ticket 1 to 3, and when you're done, you kill the branch, and then you grab ticket 2 to 2, and then that's a brand new branch. That works very well when these purple boxes are scratch orgs. So we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Okay, so that's how we normally do it at CircleCI. Now, there are differences if you choose to use sandboxes or PDEs. PDE stands for partner developer environments. So if you are a partner of Salesforce, as opposed to a customer of Salesforce, you get access to these things called PDEs, which are basically developer sandbox on steroids. They have a higher limits, they have some licenses. And if you are a partner of Salesforce, like a consulting company, I recommend you use PDEs for this. If you are a customer of Salesforce instead, no problem. You have plenty of dev sandboxes, and a couple of partial data, or perhaps you have a full copy sandbox. Then I recommend you use your Dev or Dev Pro sandboxes for your development. If you don't have full copy, then you want to use your partial copy for UAT. If you do have a full copy sandbox, please use that for UAT, and maybe you can either free up your partial sandbox for your customers to do demos, or you can use them for QA. That's really up to you. Again, million ways to skin this cat, a lot of different solutions. You pick the one that fits you best. So I'm going to talk about the left and the right. The easiest way to do this is by reading the slide. I hate reading slides, but sometimes it's the easiest way. So if you are working on sandboxes, and remember, sandbox can also be a partner dev environment. Every developer gets their own sandbox. Those sandboxes are going to have to be refreshed every so often. And we'll retrieve code using any normal IDE. VS Code retrieves code. You can do retrieve from an org. For example, if you created an object, you can go and say, bring me that object and bring me that page layout and bring me those custom fields. You want to consider enabling source tracking. So source track sandboxes allow you to do what scratch orgs let you do, and we'll talk about that in a moment, which is push and pull. So automatically bring you the latest changes since the last time you retrieve them. So you spin up a sandbox, you create an object, you do pull, and VS Code will go all the way up to the sandbox and will say what has happened since the last time, and we'll bring that to you. It makes life a lot easier. So if you can, you should consider enable source track metadata. Any other environment, integration, QA, UAT, are also going to be sandboxes for PDEs. And again, we talked about earlier, you really want your UAT to be a full copy. That needs to be pre-production, needs to be identical. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where your customers are going to find any problems. And if UAT and production are very, very different, they may not catch all of the issues. So you really want to make sure UAT and prod are as similar as you can make them. Integration and QA don't have to be partial copy sandboxes, don't have to be full sandboxes. Dev or Dev Pro are just fine in these cases. Again, if you have a partial copy, you want to use it for QA, that's also okay. I normally like to use partial copy sandboxes for demos. So if I have to demonstrate some user, like run a POC, a partial copy is cool because I have like my accounts, but I don't have everything else. So I can just nitpick what is it that I want. Here's the problem. If you're developing managed packages, meaning you're using namespace, sandboxes are hard to work with because you cannot add a namespace on a sandbox, which means that your testing has to happen both before packaging and after packaging, because it's very easy to create code inside of a managed package that doesn't work once that managed package has a namespace. It's just very feeble. It breaks very quickly. So if you use namespaces, meaning if you're developing a managed package, you should do testing before and after your packaging org, which in my case would be master. So if you think about the chart I showed you, if you're working on a managed package, production is packaging, okay? And it also makes it harder to develop modularly. I'm going to talk about modular development when I deal with scratchers, but effectively the idea of modular development is to separate, to create a separation of concerns. Okay, so I'm going to talk about scratchers a little bit. By the way, if you are familiar with what PDOs do and App Exchange development, in my mind, when I think sandbox development, it's 1 GP and scratcher developers is 2 GP. If you are not used to develop packages, forget about the words 1 GP and 2 GP. They're likely going to confuse you. Just think about sandboxes versus scratchers. So what if you don't want to, what if you want to do scratchers? What if you say SFDX is the way in the future, which it is, and I want to build scratchers because I think they're easier, the limits are a lot lower, a lot higher, and I can just, create what I need to do and build it back down? Then you'd be right. That's the easiest way. It's my recommendation for 90% of the cases. It can be difficult to move to a sandbox from a sandbox-based development if you're using it now to scratcher, but it's worth the effort, and I really suggest that you do it. Don't do it rush, plan it, do it carefully, but think about doing it. It's the way of the future. So here's the good thing about scratchers. They are automatically source tracked, meaning that you can pull code and push code only what changes, so you don't have to deploy the whole code base every time you make a change. Developers can have 1, 2, 3 scratchers. Those limits tend to be higher because you're spinning scratch of a production environment. I don't have the limits handy, I apologize, but they are fairly high. And you can even use integration as a scratcher. You don't really have to use a real sandbox or a PDE for this. Now, it really depends on what dependencies you have. If you have 15, 20 managed packages installed, you're going to have to install those managed packages in integration and sometimes in your scratcher so that you can develop properly. If you have 15 managed packages, by the way, use sandboxes. That's easier. Installing 15 managed packages is a pain. But if you have 2 or 3, you may want to consider working on scratchers that last maybe 30 days, because it can take a while to install those 2 or 3 packages, but make integration a real environment, a persistent org, like a sandbox, or even a dev pro. That way, you don't have to rebuild integration with those packages every time you commit code just to test what else is going on. You still want UAT, QA, and the rest to be normal sandboxes, but here's the good thing. If you are developing a managed package, you can put namespaces at the very beginning all the way down in scratchers. That is super, super convenient because it reduces the amount of QA you need to do. You just do QA after packaging, not a big deal. If you choose not to package every time, you can do it before, but you don't get into the, oh my goodness, I forgot to namespace this field, and after I package, I can't find it. So if you're developing in a namespace, either because you're developing for the App Exchange or because you want to namespace different parts of your development in your own company, I really recommend you use scratchers. And one of the other advantages of a scratch-based org development is that it's easier to develop modularly. So for example, you can spin up 2 or 3 scratchers for the developers that are doing, I don't know, CPQ, and 2 or 3 for the ones that are develop management. And because the source of truth is always going to be GitHub, you spin up the sandbox, you hit push, things are populated, you go. You can even get sophisticated, and in your DevOps pipeline, you can pre-populate those scratchers with data. You can do some pretty nifty things with scratchers that get a little harder with sandbox. And here's the best part about scratchers: they go away in less than a month. They can go away in a day. So you can create scratchers between 1 and 30 days. So you can create one, do what you need to do, get rid of it. And the next time you'll have your data, your metadata just pristine. You can start again, push your code, you're good. So you can break it, you can destroy it, you can configure it, you can run a quick proof of concept. You didn't like it, destroy the scratch org, spin a new one, pop your stuff, you're up and running. So those are the 2 main differences. But the differences between those 2. So let me show you a very quick and mini demo of how DevOps can work. Again, it's a contrived demo. It's very simple, but this is how it could work for you and your company. So what I'm going to do is this is a development environment. So it behaves like a sandbox. In my case, it's my environment, but it could be my colleague. Okay. I also spun up as you can see, a scratcher. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a scratcher and I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to call the object demo test. And what I'm going to do at the end of this, and I'm going to stop and explain what I'm doing, is I'm going to show you how I'm going to create the object. I'm going to create one field. I'm going to retrieve all of that information. I'm going to create a class. I'm going to put a little hello world, and we're going to deploy all of that into the other sandbox without having to create a single change set. So why don't we just create this object? I'm not going to put a lot of attention to this. I'm going to call this object, as I said, demo test. Need to put a plural label. Sure you've all done this before. I'm not going to put a description. Let's going to make this an auto number. Nah, let's keep it as text. Again, it's a simple example just to demonstrate how this works. So I created the object. Now I am going to create a brand new field as long as this finishes. There we go. So you can see the name, demo test. And my field, let's create a text field. Let's make this simple. And the text field is going to be called, I don't know, demo attendee, demo name. Again, we don't want to build something complex here. It's just a quick demo to show how this works. So we created a field demo name. We're going to make it visible. We're not going to make it read-only. We're going to place it on the page layout. We're going to click on save. All right, great. So now I have an object. I'm going to switch screens into my code. Now, please keep in mind, I am an IntelliJ IDEA user. I am not a VS Code user. So this may look a little different to you, but VS Code does this just as fine and just as easy as you would do this in any IDE. So we're going to call pull. You notice I click the pull button because I'm working with a sandbox here. And so at the very bottom, it's telling me it's pulling for the change metadata, and it says that it added things. Not sure what it added yet, so let's explore. Inside of the force app default, I now have an object called demo test. I had a throwaway object that I created before for testing. And inside of that, I have a field called demo name. I also have a page layout called demo test. So as you can see, I was able to retrieve the metadata I created. I did not do anything other than push one button. So now I have this. I'm going to create a class. Why not? So we're going to do an Apex class. This is, we're going to call it demo test. No, we're going to use the word test. We're going to call it demo class. And let's write something very, very simple. So public void hello world. And we're going to do, let's make it a string. And we're going to do return. Can't type today. Hello. But now we wrote code. So we need to do one more thing. As you can imagine, we need to create a class, a test class. So demo. Oh, my screen is stuck. Thank you for letting me know. Let's see if I can go back. Can you, I need someone, Nathan or someone to tell me if you can see Salesforce now.
I can. We're looking at the field list for demo test.
Okay, can you see my code right now?
No, might just be.
That's what I figured. It's okay. How about now?
No, maybe stop sharing and
let's try. Yeah. Let's try to share again. Thank you, Shri, for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's try sharing this again. And so my expectation now is that you're going to be, oh, you can't see the code. Hold on. Now, let me see if I find my sharing settings may not be working fine. Well, I'm going to have to stop sharing and reshare. I think I know what's going on here. Oh, entire screen. Okay, I figured this out. I'm sorry, all. You should be seeing my code now.
Perfect. There we go. Nice.
Excellent. I apologize. So anyway, I'm going to quickly show what I saw earlier that you probably didn't see at all. So I have an object and a page layout and a field that I retrieved by clicking this button right here that says pull. Again, this is IntelliJ IDEA with Illuminated Cloud. It's a paid product. It's not free. I highly recommend it. The person who maintains this, his name is Scott, and he's amazing. But if you don't want to pay, you should absolutely use VS Code. This works very, very, very similarly. So back where I left off, we're going to create a test class. I'm going to call it test, and I want to use that template right there. And so let's make this static. That way it's easier to test. And then I can do an assert. Hello. We call this demo class.hello world. So let's push that into the code. I hit the save button, and it's the same thing as push metadata. That's moving up. I am a very responsible developer, so as soon as that's done, I'm going to run my test. I just want to make sure I'm not going to fail it when I push it, because that would be embarrassing. So obviously, every time it says succeeded, so let's run the tests. So that's one of the reasons why I like this tool so much. It comes with a test suite inside. I don't really have to go far away to do my thing. And the test passed. Great. That's really all I wanted. The test passed, and demo class, it's not covered. So, oh, I know why. I ran this incorrectly. I need to run this with coverage. My apologies. I want to make sure I'm covering code. Again, being a responsible developer, there we go. 100% of the lines covered. This is, no developer has ever done this before, 100% code coverage. So let's push this forward. So I am a very graphic-oriented guy. So what you're about to see, again, is a Git client. It's a Git client that I prefer. I'm not endorsing Git Kraken, although I really like it. You can do command line. Again, any Git client is good for it. They all work the same way. I am choosing to use this one called Git Kraken. So I'm going to stage my changes, and I'm going to push them from my local hard drive to the remote. And if I don't push them to the remote, by the way, they're not going to be there. If you don't know how to use GitHub, by the way, that's where I would start before doing any of this. But it's very important that we push to the remote. So I'm going to call it demo changes, and I'm going to hit commit, and I'm going to hit push. So now all of my code is on github.com. It's saved. If I lose my computer, I can retrieve it. In the meantime, I'm also going to initiate a PR, but I'm going to do this from the browser because that's a little easier for you guys to see. So let me see if I can get rid of moving screens around so I can show you. So what I'm going to do is, at the same time, I'm going to create a PR. So I'm going to create a pull request that says I want to grab development, and I want to compare it to integration. And so what this is going to show me is all the differences between the two branches. And they should match, hopefully, everything that I just did. So I created a class and its metadata. I created a test class and its metadata. I have a page layout and an object and a field. I think we're good. So I'm going to hit create pull request. And I'm going to leave a comment for the person reviewing this. Please review my code. It is perfect for a demo. And I'm going to hit create pull request. So all of these things that I did effectively are the same as creating a change set and uploading it. Now, you guys are probably happening, what magic's running behind the scenes? Like you're talking about all of these automatic deployment, but you really haven't seen any automatic deployment yet, because there's one tool that I haven't shown you yet. We at Code Science use a tool called CircleCI. There's a million of these tools around. I love Circle because it's cheap, it's inexpensive, and it's easy to configure. And so what Circle did when I pushed is it built and tested my code. Okay, so I'm going to go quickly through this. So what happens is it created a Docker, a Docker image with some things installed, like a basic operating system. It installed this FTX. It installs a couple of dependencies that I need. It authenticated against my org. It ran PMD source scanner, which is very important. If you guys have any interest on keeping your code clean, the PMD source scanner is the best thing to do. You should run it every time. It's going to tell you if you have any big issues with your code. And then it deployed the code somewhere. In reality, it didn't deploy it anywhere because I am just testing against my own I'm just testing against my own stuff. But it tested that my jobs work. And then I didn't configure this, so I really didn't do anything, but you can even configure it to talk to Slack and post in a channel saying, hey, I worked. That's kind of cool, especially when you have big deployments going on. You want to make sure they worked, and you don't want to monitor them. And if they take 50 seconds, it's one thing, but sometimes they take 10, 15 minutes. You want to grab a cup of tea or walk around the block or something. So that's one thing. The other thing that you can do with CircleCI is I told you I run PMD source scanner, and you're saying, that's great, Seb, but where can I read the results? Well, you go to artifacts, and we have been saving all of these things. Look at this. There's a PMD results.html. I can click on that, and now I have PMD. Well, obviously, I have a problem there. So this is a very, very cool thing to use. It makes life a lot simpler, but it really hasn't done anything yet because I'm not pushing a PR. I'm just testing things against my own code. Here's where the magic happens. I'm going to merge this pull request. I'm not sure. Apex PMD scanner is the one I'm using. Yes. I am going to click merge pull request and confirm the merge. Now, here's where if you have any code review steps, they go right here. You can add reviewers. You can assign them. They can make comments. They can tell you that's the wrong name or you didn't use the right code pattern. That goes to any policies that you want to establish. Here's the important thing. Once the PR is merged, I'll show you what happens on CircleCI. You see now that it's building, but instead of building on development, it's building on integration. See if I can zoom that a little bit. It's integrations. So now what this code is doing is it's the same thing it just did, except that instead of doing it against my branch, it's doing it against integration. So I'm effectively deploying this virtual change that I created. And let's take a look and see it work. So it's deploying metadata. So it's going to take a minute right there, probably a literal minute. The other one took 57 seconds. This one is at 30. So we're going to wait for a second. And this is the best thing. It's like watching paint dry. Oh, it finished. 34 seconds. That was quick. And so you're not going to believe me unless I show you, right? So why don't I show you? So this is my DevOps demo. I'm going to click the setup menu. Let's start with Apex, shall we? We're going to wait for this to load. I'm going to type Apex. And my expectation is we're going to find two classes, at least two classes there. Look at this. Here are my classes. Look at the time, January 12, 2023 at 6:48 p.m. Pacific time. This sounds like it just happened. Let's see if our object made it through. We called it demo test. It helps if I would type correctly. Oh, look at this. A demo test. Oh, was it created today? It was. And so let's see if it has the field that I added. Field is right here. Let's see if the page layout is here, meaning that the field I created was added to the page layout and that page layout made it through. And as you can see, demo name is right here. Nilesh, is it stuck for you guys? I'm on Salesforce right now.
I'm able to see, yeah, that's pretty responsive as well.
Yeah, this might be on your end this time, Nilesh. Thanks for bringing that up, by the way. I appreciate it. Yeah, Shri can see this, so that's something to keep in mind. So, as demos goes, this is probably not the best one you've ever seen, but I hope I was able to show you a little bit of how this can work. I want you to imagine now that instead of one developer and one sandbox, you have 10 developers and 10 sandboxes and scratch orgs. And so that ability to be able to grab the code and push it to another sandbox, it's outstanding, right? Because not only you can send, you can also receive. You can merge a branch, and I'm going to show you one way to do so. So I can grab integration and merge it to development like so, properly. And if I have another developer who was, for example, merging code to integration, did it last night before I created this branch, I am now pushing all the code that's in integration down to my branch. So let's look at CircleCI. Let's refresh that. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. There were no changes. Of course, there were no changes. So GitHub didn't detect any changes, so it didn't push a build. But if you had Mary and Joe and Peter pushing code, I would have just gotten that and it would have built my sandbox. or my scratcher. So it's very, very, very cool. Thanks, Nathan, for sending a link to PMD. So let's go back to the presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed this demo. I'm going to stick around a little bit for Q&A. But I want to, before we kind of wrap our conversation today, I want to show you a couple of links. Again, these links exist. They are on these. They're going to stay on the deck, and I'm going to furnish a deck to Nathan so he can publish it or distribute it along with everything else. So there's a link to CircleCI documentation if you're interested to see how it can be configured, because all of these steps don't come automatically. These steps need to be configured. This is the part that I haven't been authorized to share with you. Okay, so that this is the proof of the proof in the pudding of all of this is behind CircleCI, but this link will show you how to configure it. There's a trail mix that you can follow to learn a lot of how this works. If you have done this exam, then you're probably familiar with what I just showed. If you haven't done this exam, I really recommend you do it. I'm not sure what the prices of them are outside. In America, they're $400, so they're not cheap. But if you read, even if you don't take the exam, you just read the trail mix, it is incredibly useful to learn how to develop scalable projects. Not how to develop Apex. It's not going to teach you Apex, but it's going to show you how to structure your project with a center of excellence, with DevOps, with proper tooling, with proper documentation on how to build a professional, scalable project. Salesforce is coming up with their own product. I'm saying it's coming up because it's not quite ready for prime time yet, even though they say it kind of is. I've seen it work. It works fairly well, but it's not perfect yet. So if I needed to start a project right now, I probably would be using the DevOps Center. But you know how Salesforce does things. They will ship something that's a little basic, that's going to work for a few people, but not for everyone, and they're going to keep them building. So you really want to keep an eye out for the DevOps Center. It's a really good tool. It shows a lot of promise, and it simplifies all of this. More importantly, you don't need CircleCI. You don't need to pay the CircleCI fees or anything like that. It's a lot easier to configure. You can use scratchers or you can use sandboxes. All you need is GitHub. In the DevOps Center, I am 99% sure it's free. Like Salesforce furnishes this for free. So that is something that you really want to take a look and explore. And what did I just do? I moved too fast. There we go. And there's another couple of tools that you want to look at. One of them is Copado. One of them is GearSet. They are, in a way, competitors to the DevOps Center. If you prefer a more ready-to-made approach to CI/CD, Copado and GearSet are definitely products you should explore. They're clearly not cheap, but they encapsulate a lot of functionality around CI/CD, like story tracking and a lot of logging. And so what I showed you today is, house-made. It works really well for code science. It can work really well for almost everyone, but it requires a human to nurture it, to keep it, to maintain it. If you don't want to do that work, you don't want to make the effort, then these products can absolutely help. They have their benefits, they have their limitations. I don't endorse either of them. I'm just kind of giving you the ideas to, go contact them, get a demo, figure this out. I don't even know how much our prices are. I just know they're not free. DevOps Center is. So with that, wow, look at this, 45 minutes, Nate. I think I might have done a good job at kind of sticking to my timeline here. This wraps up our conversation today, but actually, no, it wraps up the presentation, not the conversation. I am here for Q&As. I've seen Jake show. I think Jake knows me. I know him. I want to make sure that you guys know that I am here for Q&A. So if you have any questions, that would be a good time to ask them.
And if you want to enter any questions in the chat instead of aloud, that's fine. I'm just going to finish posting one more link or two in the chat. I'm just switching back and forth. Okay, Salesforce extension pack expanded. Expanded, which Apex PMD. What are they called? Plugin. What is the VS Code thing? You're not a VS Code guy. extension.
Not a VS Code person, extension. That's the word. Yes.
I clung on to Sublime as much until, I was giving a talk at LA's Force Academy LA, actually, I think 2018. And one of the other presenters watched my talk. He said, "You really should switch to VS Code." And I'm glad, because Maven's Mate, which runs on Sublime, Joe Ferraro, I think finally said, "I need to be a dad and stop
Right.
devoting my life to maintaining Maven's Mate."
That's when I made the jump originally from Maven's Mate to VS Code, but I quickly ended up in IntelliJ. Again, it's a private product. I don't get paid for it if you guys buy it or don't buy it. I just kind of swear by it because it has a lot of really, really cool tools embedded.
And
that
this
make
is
my
the
life
first
easier.
time I've seen IntelliJ since I think maybe 2012 or 2011, and it just keeps looking better and better. So it's been around for a long time, and it was around long before I saw it first. Okay, so I'm gonna post this for people that use VS Code. I don't think that the Salesforce extension pack, just normal, has the Apex, because it's not a official Salesforce provided extension, but there is a Salesforce extension pack expanded, which, let me just send this message. Let's see. So yeah, Salesforce extension pack expanded has tons of Salesforce official plugins, plus XML extension by Red Hat, ESLint by Microsoft, Prettier, which just, I think everybody should have Prettier.
Yes.
Don't go to a browser and go to jsbeautifier.org and paste your intellectual property just to prettify it. Have it in your editor. And then look, Financial Forces Apex Log Analyzer. So I just posted a link in there. Also, I'm not sure if the chat's going to be sent to me, emailed to me when this is over, but I will copy any of the Q&A, any of the links, and I will provide more resources, links, etc. In the wrap-up email. Probably not going to happen tonight, but I will definitely before Monday send out a recap with a link to the video of the recording, and I'm going to put that on my brand new YouTube brand channel for the LA developer group. Okay, I had one question. So,
yes, sir.
Code coverage. If it's less than 75%, if you run all tests, it has to average out to 75%. If you run specific tests, every test that you touch has to be 75% or more. So if it's less, it'll fail. But how do you see, obviously you can just, run tests and go to the developer console, et cetera, right? And see that it's, 78% or 95%. How do you make sure that your code, like what percentage your code is as early as possible, right? Without just going into dev console.
So the way I do it, let me take a step back, Nathan, address this differently. The one thing that actually you implicitly raised that I think everybody should hear is that all of the rules of deployment that you normally have still apply. The code coverage limits, the different types of, you can deploy running all tests or specific tests, or even no tests at all if you're deploying against the sandbox. Do that at your own risk, but you could. All of that's configurable and you can absolutely do it. Now, how do I find out that my code coverage is not adequate? Is by leveraging my IDE. So the IDE I use is IntelliJ, allows me to create, I have an old test suite and then I run. And just like this thing, it showed me, well, maybe it didn't. So let's start to run that baby again with coverage. It shows me up here on my classes what my coverage looks like right there. So again, that's my IDE. You can run them off of the dev console, or if you're a daredevil, you can just simply push your code and let CircleCI tell you. So if you look at my
or your release manager tell you when they get the
fair enough. Well, but this is even before the PR, Nathan. So if you look at this one, I built against my own branch. So I'm going to click on build and test, and I'm going to go to deploy code, which should be right there. And you see all of the tests run, and that is my code coverage. So if you're anywhere under, you get yelled at, even within your own org, even before you open the PR. So that's something that you should keep in mind. You are constantly deploying against your own org when you push. And so this will run your tests, unless you configure it not to. I don't advise you doing that. But you can absolutely and should absolutely run all your tests. Again, the concept is to fail fast. The sooner you find out issues with your code, the better.
Yeah.
Here's what some people do, and in the right circumstance can work too. Some people do 2 deployments. The first deployment runs with no tests whatsoever. The second deployment run tests. Yes, it runs twice, but here's why we do it twice. We do it twice because running it without tests guarantees that I'm going to get my code deployed in the org. And then the second time will fail the CI build, but I already deployed my code that fails tests. Why is that important? Remember the example we gave at the beginning of the conversation. So what happens if Mary is writing a validation rule, and I'm writing code against that object that breaks the validation rule, but I don't have the validation rule on my list. So when I bring Mary's code from integration into my branch, my build is going to fail because I am breaking that validation rule. But if I deploy even before there's tests run, then now I have Mary's code deployed on my org. The test will continue to fail, but now all of the stuff that's making it break, it's in my sandbox. I can go and fix it myself. If I don't have that, then I have to ask Mary to fix her code or to put or to change or remove my code, my offending code, then deploys Mary's code and then put it back on. It makes life a little harder. So there is certainly a case to be made for running the deployment twice. The first time without tests, the second with tests. Obviously, that's not going to work in production because you can run without tests, but it works everywhere else. And I don't know if that answers your question, Nathan. I know I gave you much more than you asked for.
Nope, that is perfect. Is IntelliJ one-off or subscription pricing?
So both of them are a subscription. So IntelliJ, I think it's a company called, I forget what it is. I apologize. It's the first tier is like $100, and then it goes down in price. So the longer you keep it, the cheaper it is to keep it. You need a plugin called Illuminated Cloud that is I'd like to say $60 or $70 a year. It's maintained and sold by a guy named Scott, Rose Silver Software. Scott actually quit his job to dedicate to do this full time. And sometimes he is faster to roll out features on his plugin than Salesforce is to roll plugins on the VS Code extension. He is very, very responsive. And I have been buying his product for now, almost 10 years, and he keeps getting better. Now, 10 years is too much, maybe 6 years. So again, Scott and I don't know each other. We exchange a few emails. Like, I am not affiliated with him at all, but he runs a top-notch thing, and he is among the most responsible and responsive vendors I have ever worked with.
I will say that the only time I am comfortable deploying to a non-production org without running any tests is when I'm just trying to get code into the box that I'm going to fix failing tests on, right?
Well, that again, when you're working with CI/CD, sometimes you have to fix things on your own branch. The mantra that we try to inculcate in people, to teach people, is that all of the changes start here. All of the changes start here. Say it again. All of the changes start here. This means no one codes here, or here, or here. You may log in and take a peek to diagnose something. That's okay. But if you gotta make a change, it starts here.
Right. Like, let's say you have a feature branch or a development branch, and you're like, okay, it's good. And then you push it forward, and then you get rid of your scratch org or your developer sandbox that you were working on that. And then you go, oh, something broke. I got to fix it. Then, deploying it into your spin up a new sandbox or a scratch org and just get it in there.
Right. Remember, the source of truth is the GitHub branch. So you spin up a new dev org. If it's a scratch org, it's even easier. and then you just push the code in, you fix it, you go into the repo. It's a changing mindset, Nathan. I found that the hardest thing for developers and non-developers alike to get their heads around is that the source of truth changes from what's in the org to what's in the repo. And once you make that leap of faith, it's like, the first time someone used an iPhone, I don't need this, and then you put an iPhone in my hand and I don't know how I live without it. That's kind of what happens when you make that switch. It's like, I can't believe I ever trusted the org. Like, I have so many people, at the beginning of my career in Salesforce, I had people going in and, like, executives making changes because that's what they wanted to do. And I'm like, who did this? And you can find it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can go to talk to the C-level. Like, that stuff is dangerous, right?
Yeah. Even if it's page layout, like one of the biggest, but wait, what if I want to is, if you deploy a page layout, the XML to production, one of the biggest things I hear is, well, wait, what if somebody changed the layout in production and it's not mirrored in lower environments? Don't do that, right? That's the solution.
In reality, that is exactly the answer. I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see your face again. It's one of the things that always happens. I think we can all establish that making changes directly in prod, no matter what they are, should be discouraged, if not stopped. But let's face it, there's a lot of awesome admins who are used to that. And for them, this is probably going to be hard because it's going to slow them down. There's no way around it. You're going to slow admins down. But here's what I think. I think it's worth the aggravation to slow them down, because what you lose in velocity, you win in consistency, you win in stability, you win in no errors. Because let's face it, we all know of someone who created a validation rule on Friday at 4 p.m. and left for the long weekend. And they don't get the phone calls on Saturday when things don't work for the sales team. We do. So all of that is stopped. And if you work for a company that enforces compliance, let's say you're a public company, or let's say you have you work with medicine, it's a good idea to not let anybody touch production at all for any reason, particularly developers or admins. This helps document everything that goes in. If you're Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, and you can look at GitHub and see every change that was made to your metadata, by whom and when, your compliance people are going to love you. With sandboxes, good luck with that.
Yep. And I, at my last position, even our non-developers, especially with a Scratch org is huge, but with a Scratch org, if you've got a script to set up the Scratch org for an admin, which I've seen shell scripts, I've seen Python scripts, you had a script in CircleCI. As long as they've got the Scratch org, they open up the org, they create an object, they create a field, and you just need sfdx force source pull, git add, git commit. Or I use source tree. Yeah, I try to stay off the command line.
Well, that's exactly right. And you're seeing git source commit with VS Code, or even with IntelliJ, it's a button click. It's still point and click. You don't need to learn, because my experience with admins is that every time you go command line, it's like, no, that's Juju. I don't care. I can't use that.
Right.
This is a button. You click a button, you push a button. GitHub, it's an adjustment for some. Again, this is not without obstacles. Admins are the obstacle for the most part, simply because developers tend to have the skills to do command line and kind of crazy juju and hacking. Admins, they're sometimes, salespeople trusting to a Salesforce admin position. They don't know what GitHub is. They don't care to know. And so sometimes with them, you have to be a little more careful and give them more training. They can all learn. This is not rocket science. It's not even difficult. But for some people, it's a change in their way of thinking, and you have to be patient with that. It's going to be an adjustment for those users, and you've got to be ready for it. We lost Nathan.
My son just got home from
practice.
Okay. Let's see. So if there are any more questions, I'll give one more call. Let's see. I'm going to make sure that our, contact info, socials, etc., GitHub profile, Trailhead profile, whatever, will be sent out to everybody that signed up. not just people that showed up. So be looking for that. And when I post the recording, so even if you didn't register, but you find this and you're watching this on YouTube,
In the future.
look in the description, right? Click like and subscribe. So look out for that. And thank you again, Sebastian, for awesome presentation. And thank you everybody for showing up.
It's been my pleasure. You guys have a great, well, evening where I am, or morning where you are, or whatever is afternoon if you're watching this at 3 p.m. on a Friday sometime. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. And my contact information is all available. It's also here on the presentation. It's going to be on the deck. I'm available. Just let me know if you need any help. I'll be happy to assist.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.